On 18 April 1945, Allied engineers breached a collapsed hillside near Nordhausen and uncovered a tunnel mouth that should not have existed. Maps showed solid rock. Instead, airflow poured out, warm and rhythmic, as if the mountain itself were breathing on a schedule. The site was catalogued under late-war SS infrastructure, yet no central blueprint matched what lay beneath. Initial surveys estimated over 60 kilometers of tunnels, but every measurement contradicted the last, suggesting expansions never formally recorded. Captain James Holloway descended first. His boots echoed too long for the corridor's width. The air smelled stale yet active, carrying distant metallic reverberations that rose and fell like machinery, cycling far out of sight. Captured SS construction files referenced Project Unterbau, a decentralized excavation program begun in 1943. Authority was split across offices, each blind to the others. Oversight collapsed as bombing intensified and command chains fractured. Holloway's team reached a junction marked with hand-painted arrows pointing inward, not out. One wall bore scrape marks from repeated impacts, clustered around a sealed steel door warped outward, as if pressure had built from the other side. Allied analysts later confirmed the door design matched internal blast containment hatches, meant to seal sections during accidents. Standard protocol dictated external locks only. This hatch had been locked from within. Deeper inside, generators hummed without fuel lines. Their output fluctuated, lights dimming in slow pulses. The rhythm measured at roughly 40 hertz, low enough to induce unease without audible sound. Technical officers argued the generators should have failed weeks earlier. Fuel inventories showed depletion, yet wear patterns suggested recent operation. One report noted, "System appears maintained by unknown process." Holloway felt pressure behind his eyes, as corridors subtly curved where they should have been straight. Chalk markings left minutes earlier no longer aligned. Distance became unreliable, steps stretching or compressing without explanation. An SS memo recovered nearby warned, "Section autonomy has exceeded command authority." The author's name was scratched out. Below it, another hand had added, "Do not re-enter sealed zones." Beyond the sealed hatch, sound behaved strangely. Footsteps returned late, slightly altered. Voices seemed to arrive from wrong angles. Holloway noted men turning instinctively toward echoes that had no source, a reflex he could not suppress. Acoustic specialists later concluded the tunnels produced phase-shifted reverberation, as if sections were misaligned by fractions of distance. No standard geometry explained the delay. One margin note read, "Corridors may not share uniform length." The team found living quarters still stocked with bunks, boots, and untouched rations. Dust lay evenly, except for narrow paths worn repeatedly between beds and a secondary passage leading deeper, marked only with tally scratches. SS personnel rosters listed the unit as evacuated weeks earlier. No reassignment records existed. Analysts debated whether the men fled, were reassigned, or never left at all. Power conduits grew thicker as the tunnels descended, feeding into a central spine wider than a rail tunnel. Heat increased steadily. Sweat beaded despite near-freezing surface temperatures above. Thermal mapping showed no boilers, no exhaust vents. The heat source appeared distributed, not localized. Engineers wrote that the rock itself radiated warmth inconsistent with geothermal gradients in the region. Holloway's watch slowed by nearly 30 seconds, over 1 hour underground. Others reported similar drift. When compared topside, all timepieces disagreed, each by a different margin. Horological experts attributed the drift to electromagnetic interference. However, recorded field strength was insufficient to affect mechanical watches. The discrepancy was logged, then quietly dropped. At a branching corridor, signage changed. German labels gave way to symbols painted directly onto stone. Concentric arcs and vertical slashes repeated at regular intervals, always pointing further inward. A translated SS note later identified the markings as internal isolation warnings. One sentence was underlined twice. Sections must not communicate once resonance stabilizes. As the team passed the symbols, the air thickened, pressing against lungs with subtle resistance. Breathing felt delayed, as if the body waited for permission. One engineer removed his helmet, convinced it was restricting him, then froze in confusion. Physiology reviewers later noted oxygen levels were normal, carbon dioxide unchanged, yet respiration rates climbed by 20%. A handwritten note questioned whether perception, not atmosphere, was being altered. They discovered rail carts abandoned mid-line, loads still strapped down. Some carried machine parts. Others carried sealed crates stamped only with weight codes. Several crates showed dents from the inside, metal bowed outward in shallow arcs. SS transport manifests listed those crates as inactive assemblies. No inventory described contents. One accounting officer had scribbled, "Weight unstable. Do not stack." Electrical cabling converged into walls rather than floors, vanishing into rock without conduits. Instruments traced current beyond mapped sections. The readings implied additional tunnels not physically present on surveys. Geologists argued the rock could not house voids at those depths without collapse. Yet vibration tests returned hollow responses, as if space existed where none should. Holloway ordered a chalk grid to track position. After 15 minutes, grid lines bent, some intersections duplicated. The map no longer corresponded to itself. Men began arguing over distances they had just walked. Psychological assessments later described acute spatial dissonance, often preceding panic. However, recorded heart rates showed restraint. The men sensed something wrong, but could not identify a threat. A service corridor ended abruptly at another sealed door, thicker than the first. This one bore scratch marks layered over years. Fingernail depth was visible in the steel. Forensic estimates suggested human effort far exceeding normal endurance. The conclusion was blunt. Whoever was inside did not expect release. Near the door, an SS order was stenciled directly into concrete. No recovery operations authorized beyond this point. The date was February 1945. The war outside still raged. Underground command had already withdrawn. When the second door was breached, the pressure equalized with a long metallic groan. Air rushed outward, carrying a sharp chemical tang. Men staggered as the corridor lights flickered, then stabilized at a dim amber glow. Inside, machinery stood arranged in concentric layouts, none labeled. Shafts rotated without belts. Coils vibrated gently. Instruments measured fluctuating fields peaking near 39.7 Hz, consistent across every device despite different functions. Technical teams later admitted no known German system synchronized unrelated machines at that frequency. One analyst wrote, "This is not production, it is calibration." Dormitory alcoves lined the chamber. Blankets lay folded. Personal effects remained untouched. Dust patterns suggested regular movement until an abrupt stop. No signs of evacuation procedures were present. SS medical logs recovered nearby recorded rising insomnia, headaches, and temporal dislocation complaints. The phrase appeared repeatedly, crossed out, then rewritten in heavier ink. One bunk bore claw marks carved into wood. Another had numbers scratched in sequence, stopping mid-count. The last visible tally read 11:27. No context explained the figure. Electrical meters spiked when personnel crossed the chamber center. Holloway felt nausea surge, vision narrowing. He ordered a withdrawal, but radio signals distorted, repeating fragments of commands out of sequence. Signal analysts later confirmed delayed loop transmissions, where messages returned before completion. Such behavior required closed feedback systems. No such systems were found. As the team retreated, lights dimmed progressively behind them, section by section, like a corridor being shut down intentionally. Power did not fail. It redirected inward. An SS directive discovered later clarified protocol. When resonance reaches autonomy threshold, human presence becomes a variable. The line below read, "Variables must be removed." Holloway exited the tunnel after 6 hours underground. His watch showed 9. Outside, the hillside was silent. No collapse occurred. The entrance remained open, exhaling warm air into the cold spring night. Allied command ordered the site sealed within 48 hours, but engineering teams resisted. Mapping attempts resumed, and immediately failed. Measuring tape snapped taut between points that should have been meters apart, then went slack without movement. Structural analysts concluded distances inside the system were not fixed. Corridors behaved as elastic volumes rather than rigid space. One note read, "This network does not occupy space normally." Captured SS correspondence revealed panic. Mid-1944 reports complained that sections no longer responded to shutdown orders. Power routing ignored manual overrides. Commanders requested demolition authorization and were denied. One SS officer wrote, "If we destroy it, we do not know what we destroy with it." The sentence was underlined twice. The memo ended with a request for reassignment. Allied scouts discovered additional entrances kilometers apart, all feeding into the same internal spine. External spacing did not match internal distances. Entry A and Entry D connected to the same junction. Cartographic overlays proved impossible. Lines folded over themselves. A British surveyor remarked that the tunnels behaved like reflections sharing one mirror. On the third day, a sealed section began emitting sound. Not machinery, rhythmic impact, irregular but purposeful. The noise originated behind a bulkhead dated earlier than the others. Engineers calculated the impacts had continued for at least 10 days, after all known personnel were listed dead or missing. No food stores existed beyond the seal. A chalk warning was found nearby, written in German and partially erased. "Do not answer when it matches your thoughts." The handwriting deteriorated toward the end. Medical officers reviewing survivor statements noted a shared fear, not being trapped, but being noticed. Several men insisted the tunnels adjusted when observed too closely. On the fourth night, power surged without input. Lights brightened deep inside the network, while surface connections remained idle. Engineers recorded synchronized spikes across unrelated circuits, peaking within milliseconds of each other. Electrical specialists concluded the system no longer relied on external generation. One report stated, "Energy behavior resembles load balancing, not supply." The implication was left unstated. A British sapper reported hearing his name spoken clearly from an inactive corridor. Others heard nothing. When he returned to the junction, his compass needle bent permanently and never recovered. Psychological screening later ruled out hysteria. The sapper's heart rate had not spiked. His report was calm, factual, and detailed, which disturbed reviewers more than panic would have. Demolition charges were placed at 3 access points. When armed, all detonators failed simultaneously. No wiring faults were found. Timers stopped at different remaining intervals, as if interrupted mid-count. Explosives experts admitted no known mechanism could halt multiple independent triggers without direct interference. The report concluded, "System denies termination." That evening, chalk markings appeared where none had been drawn. Symbols matched earlier SS isolation warnings, but inverted. They pointed outward now, toward the exits. A linguist suggested inversion implied a role reversal. Containment no longer protected the interior. It protected the exterior. At dawn, warm air output ceased. The mountain fell silent. Internal temperatures dropped rapidly, equalizing unnaturally fast. When scouts re-entered, corridors had shortened. Junctions collapsed into single paths. The final Allied memo recommended permanent abandonment. It closed with a single line. Control was lost before discovery. Recovery is neither possible nor advisable. In May 1945, the entrances were sealed with concrete and steel. Records show no collapse sounds, no internal resistance. The mountain accepted the seals too easily, which unsettled the engineers more than failure would have. Post-war inspections using seismic pulses returned inconsistent echoes. Some signals reflected instantly, others returned minutes later. A few never came back at all, as if absorbed. Geophysicists concluded the internal geometry no longer matched physical volume. One classified note suggested the tunnels had reconfigured into a closed internal state. In 1947, a French survey team reported warm airflow from a slope with no known access. The reading matched earlier Ardennes measurements at roughly 40 Hz. The team was reassigned the same week. SS archives released decades later revealed the final assessment. The system achieved operational autonomy. The term used was Eigenstruktur, self-structuring environment. No further orders were issued. One memo admitted command failure explicitly. Authority cannot be enforced where space itself is non-compliant. The document was unsigned. Modern satellite scans still show subtle thermal inconsistencies along the ridge in winter months. Snow melts in linear patterns that do not match geology. Officials attribute it to groundwater. Yet veterans who entered the tunnels agree on one detail. The system was not unfinished. It was complete. And completion was the moment control ended. If stories like this disappear, it is rarely because they were disproven. It is because no one could decide where the tunnels actually ended,